Nick.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, we are going to review the new album from The Strokes, entitled Comedown Machine. I don't know if you guys have heard of The Strokes or not. Tom, have you heard of The Strokes?
A little bit.
Oh, okay. What do you think about them?
I really like them.
Yeah.
They're one of those classic bands. I mean, Is This It came out when I think I was in like 7th grade. And we got that album right away, my brothers and I, and we just loved it. And it's funny because obviously, I was that young, I was still listening to music a lot, but it wasn't...
Very impressionable.
It wasn't about hype to me.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't online, whatever the internet was back in 2001 or whatever, 2000, I wasn't online reading blogs and looking at what everyone else was saying about it, so I felt like my take on that album was a little more pure, and I really like that. Mm-hmm. There's nothing tainted about my opinion when I was in 7th grade, so I just fell in love with that album, and I really, really enjoyed digging into everything that the Strokes did after that. Some albums I really liked, some I didn't. I loved Room on Fire. I think that's actually an overlooked album in their discography.
Completely agree.
First Impressions of Earth, I liked pretty well, but it was a little weaker. It didn't like Angles too much. We reviewed that a couple years ago when it came out, yeah. So now Comedown Machine, I'm thinking, well, where are they going to go with their sound? Because they've already done a lot with their sound, and they've really kind of created this divide between fans of theirs, because there are some fans who are always going to hate anything they do that sounds clean.
Yeah.
Anything they do that has that pristine production, because they're so attached to Is This It?
Yeah.
And the raw, gritty presentation of it that they're just going to say, why aren't you making another version of Is This It?
Today I went and read a bunch of reviews on this album because I was blown away. Metacritic has this at 67 right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is going on? I went and read the reviews. Almost all of the negative reviews contain the words "Is this it?" in the first couple sentences,
which shows that you're not letting a band grow, and that's actually well, and not even necessarily grow. I feel like that implies that you're moving on to better things. I'm not necessarily saying it has to be better. You're just moving on to different things.
Right.
Let them change direction.
Right.
But now I will say a lot of people get mad at us when we say we don't like a change in a band's sound, because they say exactly what I just said. You say, well, you have to let a band grow. Well, it's all about what direction they take it.
How will they pull it off?
Exactly. And I think on Comedown Machine, they actually do it very well.
I think so.
I think that this album sounds like a combination of all the different sounds that they have put into their previous 4 albums. There are songs on here that sound exactly like they could have been taken from probably Room on Fire more than anything. I'm referring specifically to All the Time and 50/50, which are 2 great tracks. They have that classic Strokes kind of distortion and filter on the vocals with the raucous kind of punk guitar. But then there are some tracks that sound a little more 80s kind of new wave, like you'd hear on Angles, with that style of production. But the thing for me, after getting past that sound, was just finding that I think this album is really well written. And I think that this is going to always be a band that people pay more attention to the sound and the songwriting, which is really a shame, because the songwriting, especially on Comedown Machine, is the saving grace. It's the highlight of it.
Right.
But like I said, you have the fans that only want the raw, Is This It? Energetic sound, and you have fans that only like the good production and hated that sound. I think a long time ago, I remember you really didn't like the Strokes, and you said it sounded kind of pukey to you.
I think I was like 15 when I said that.
Well,
but sure.
Well, maybe I'm thinking way too far back into our past. But my point being, whether you think that or not, or how long ago it was, I could actually understand people thinking that, because the aesthetic of the sound itself, it isn't really all that bright and shiny. And if you're into that kind of music, you're probably going to like Angles and Comedown Machine a little better. But to me, it's all about the songwriting and how the presentation reflects that and complements it. And here, I think it's a good marriage of the two.
Very true. And, one thing you pointed out, it's always been about the songwriting. It's just that's not what people fell in love with the Strokes about. Is This It would not have been as amazing of an album as it just is if it wasn't for the good songwriting. The same thing throughout.
Totally.
In fact, one thing that we complained a lot about on Angles in 2011 was that album had really killer tracks, but a lot of the tracks weren't that good. There was a few, like 3 really killer tracks, and that was due to good songwriting. In this album, you get a new sense of the Strokes, and one thing that really stuck out to me was these guys are this is a much more emotionally based listen. You can tell that these guys are embracing an emotional side, an emotional maturity, not only in their sound but in their songwriting. There's several slower, softer tracks on here, specifically 80s Comedown Machine, kind of the title track, track 9 Chances, and the closer, Call It Fate, Call It Karma. Like all 3 of those tracks do a very good job of communicating an emotional sense of ideas from the Strokes. Strokes that you haven't heard on previous albums. Now,
I totally agree.
And one thing, you know, while I didn't think Chances was the strongest song on this album, I think it was one of the weaker tracks.
Yeah, I agree.
I definitely thought 80s Comedown Machine was one of the strongest tracks. I loved how the instrumental palette they used. You know, a lot of people are complaining about the Julian Casablancas, his use of his falsetto.
I think it's great.
I think it is too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are complaining about that because on previous albums it's been putrid. I don't know what he did. Like, he must have gone through some sort of like vocal cleansing, vocal training. Something happened, but this guy's falsetto actually is pretty nice. And I'm betting there's some, you know, computerization of digitization of those. But you know, I still think it comes off nice on recording, especially in track 1, Tap Out, and then, you know, some of the later tracks on the album. I feel like the variety of sound that they give us here, the quality of the songwriting consistently throughout, the more that I dug into this, the more I liked it.
I totally agree.
Each successive listen, I got a little bit more out of it and was like, wow, this is really well done. The only thing that I really have to complain about is the fact that I feel like the scope was a little limited. The songs are in a very pop structure, written very well and composed very well, but it's a little too simple. I wish they would have been a bit more adventurous, maybe thrown some more ideas into their sound into their songwriting instead of just focusing on presenting their sound in a creative way. Because this is a big adaptation for the band.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was the same way with you as far as just liking it a little more every listen. I usually find that when I'm around 4 or 5 listens on an album, I really start to kind of plateau.
Yeah.
I know the songs really well. I've kind of formulated my opinion, and it can still fluctuate from there sometimes. But on this album, the first listen, I was kind of unimpressed, and I was just like, this kind of sounds like their last couple albums, and nothing jumped out at me. As every time I listened, a new song would really grip me.
Right.
And I found that after a while, after maybe 3 or 4 listens, I just loved the first 7 tracks, and then it kind of slumped for me. After a few more listens, though, I realized I wasn't done with it yet, and even those last 4 tracks really kind of came up for me.
And to me, exactly the opposite happened.
Really?
I really like the tracks from like 80s Comedown Machine, track 5 on down the album, but then the first few tracks I really wasn't getting that much out of. But through successive listens, I fell in love with those too.
Which all of this combined with how many listens this really took for us to understand just tells me that this is an album that has something for everybody and a lot to dig into.
Yeah,
and a lot to think about.
It also tells me that a lot of the reviewers out there did not give this enough time. Because this is an album unlike any other Strokes album. It takes more to get into this one than you know, any of their previous work did.
It doesn't really have that instant appeal. It's a little more of a challenge.
No, and there's not the big hooks aren't there either.
Yeah.
I mean, even from Angles, Angles had some killer hooks that made those great tracks so great, like in Machu Picchu. But you know what else is different is that they improved the production on this album.
Yeah.
It's not perfect yet. I would still have liked to seen more dynamics, more just, you know, balls behind some of the bass and but I feel like, you know, like the track 50/50, I feel like they nailed the production on that one.
Perfect, yeah.
So I feel like as a whole, this album is just a clear step up from 2011's Angles. You know, maybe it might not be your favorite Strokes album, but I feel like it's a very good album, and it's definitely being underrated right now.
I totally agree.
What are you giving it? You liked it.
I'm giving 86. I really found myself falling in love with this thing. I like every track. It's just solid.
I'm not quite in that much in love. Now, I have said that the more I listen to this, the more I like it. I might get there, but right now I'm only at an 81.
Okay.
That still puts this in the mid-80s for us, which is significantly higher than what most other reviewers are giving this right now. So I want to know what you guys think, because, you know, as Strokes fans are very passionate fans, and that's something that we really love at Velocities of Music. So if you guys are passionate, like either you love this album or you absolutely hate it, please leave us a comment and tell us why at www.velocitiesofmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesofmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave us a comment as to what you're into from 2013, because your comments decide what we review. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Movie Music Critique Forward.